Tonight on Perspectives. President Trump unveils his new America First national security strategy, announcing great power competition is back.
The United States has often stood beside Israel. We did not on December 23, 2016.
Washington against the world, the U.S. vetoes a UN Security Council resolution on its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
We will not make that mistake again.
And after almost 2 weeks of near nightly missile fire from the Gaza Strip, we ask what's driving the latest escalation and whether it can be kept under control. Hello, you're watching Perspectives. I'm Eylon Levy. After almost 2 weeks of near-nightly missile fire from the Gaza Strip, tension in southern Israel. On Sunday night, the Israeli Air Force bombed 6 Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip in retaliation for 2 missiles that landed inside Israeli territory. Here's a look at the damage caused by one of those missiles, which hit a house in an Israeli border village. Also overnight, missile sirens blared in southern Israel, sending residents running for cover. Israel holds the Gaza Strip's Islamist rulers Hamas accountable for any rocket fire, but the rockets are being fired by other Salafist groups. Joining us now from the Gaza border is our defense correspondent Daniel Tzemach. Daniel, Israel is warning that it won't allow any harm to come to its citizens, saying it will do everything to stop this missile fire. But Prime Minister Netanyahu coming under attack from opposition leaders, saying he's weak on Hamas. Is this drip, drip, tit for tat going to continue, or is the IDF going to change its tactics eventually?
Well, Eylon, it's really, this is the heart of the question that people are asking right now, is that how long can they really tolerate this tit for tat? How long will the people of the South and these Israeli communities bordering the Gaza border really tolerate the drizzling, if you will, of this rocket fire? And will they be able to really stand with an IDF response that's somewhat actually restrained, according to most people? And the truth of the matter is that we can't really speculate as to whether or not the IDF will up their level of response, will maybe respond more aggressively, or actually more airstrikes. So right now we can only speculate as to whether or not they'll change course. But for now, if the past is any indication to the future, it's likely to remain as it is.
Daniel, now missiles are not the only threat on the Gaza border at the moment. There's also the threat of tunnels. Israel's afraid of cross-border tunnels from the Gaza Strip into Israel. What's the latest in that situation?
Well, so, you know, Eylon, actually behind me, if you can make it out, there's actually some construction going on. And this construction is happening right along the border. I don't know specifically what it is, but I can only speculate as to whether or not this is indeed the underground fence that the IDF has been building for well over a month now. But what's important to mention is just a few weeks ago, actually last week, we heard the IDF say that by 2018, all tunnels from the Gaza Strip that penetrate into Israeli territory will be destroyed. And so for the residents of the South, it's not just rocket fire that they fear, it's also the tunnel threat, as you mentioned. And that is definitely a prevailing fear for residents in the South. But if it does happen, as the IDF says it will, that they're indeed going to destroy all these tunnels in what's now actually 2 weeks, then theoretically you would say that that threat will likely be resolved. But the chances are that there will be something that will happen in the next few weeks, in a matter's time, that will probably escalate the situation again, but it's still just speculation at this point.
Okay, Daniel Tzemach, our defense correspondent, reporting from us from the Gaza-Israel border, an area that's been under drip, drip missile fire for the last few weeks and has seen numerous missile sirens. Daniel Tzemach, thank you very much. We're taking a very short break. When we come back, U.S. President Donald Trump announces his new national security strategy today. We have all the details. Protests in Austria as the far right enters the coalition government. And at the United Nations Security Council today, the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital was the topic of discussion. The U.S. vetoed it. What did that draft resolution say? We'll bring you that just after the break.
Every stone, every street, every scar tells the story of Israel. A place that speaks of the souls of Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Changed by time and conflicted, its magic still echoes in the hearts of its people. Join I-24 News' Jordana Miller on a journey through history. Watch Holy Land Uncovered every Sunday at 10:05 a.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Go beyond the headlines every day on I-24 News. Host Ami Kaufman talks to the news makers and pundits to bring you the story behind the headlines. The Spin Room with Ami Kaufman, Sunday to Thursday at 8:05 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to Perspectives. Great power competition has returned. U.S. President Donald Trump just unveiled his new America First national security strategy with a realist document upending Washington's post-Cold War diplomacy. It calls for the U.S. to protect its own interests against China and Russia, two revisionist powers seeking to change the global status quo. The document also scraps the view of climate change as a national security threat. Well, to discuss more on the new American national security strategy, we have a number of...
This strategy recognizes that whether we like it or not, we are engaged in a new era of competition. We accept that vigorous military, economic, and political contests are now playing out all around the world. We face rogue regimes that threaten the United States and our allies. We face terrorist organizations, transnational criminal networks, and others who spread violence and evil around the globe. We also face rival powers, Russia and China, that seek to challenge American influence, values, and wealth. We will attempt to build a great partnership with those and other countries, but in a manner that always protects our national interest.
And for more analysis of the new U.S. national security strategy, let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv. He's in D.C. And in Moscow, we have Alexei Klebnikov of the Russian International Affairs Council. Gentlemen, thank you to both of you. Dan Raviv, let's go back to you. Let's go to you first. Great power competition is back. Is the Cold War back on?
Well, to a degree. Several times President Trump has said that it would be nice to have great and friendly relations with Russia and China. Trump, in his speech, mentioned that U.S. intelligence helped the Russians foil a terrorist attack just the other day, apparently, that would have taken place in St. Petersburg, and Trump said thousands of people could have died. That's what cooperation could be, but we have a rivalry. Now, that is what Donald Trump likes, whether it's his TV show for years, The Apprentice, where he was in charge of a competition among competitors who wanted to be the survivors. Is that what the world is like these days? Trump thinks that the American people see things that way, that when they elected him president in November of last year, they were waking up to the fact that America's been stepped all over in global affairs. And so he is trying to restore American confidence, be proud of what it is that we have that special, and he's proud to be spending $700 billion on defense if Congress agrees. He says he has to beef up the military, and he says that also will create jobs, of course, in the defense industry. Eylon.
Dan Raviv, as you say, this is President Trump trying to differentiate himself from his predecessors with a shift in diplomacy. Let's have a listen to what President Trump had to say about the policy of his predecessors in the Oval Office.
Our leaders in Washington negotiated disastrous trade deals that brought massive profits to many foreign nations. They failed to insist that our often very wealthy allies pay their fair share for defense. They neglected a nuclear menace in North Korea, made a disastrous, weak, and incomprehensibly bad deal with Iran, and allowed terrorists such as ISIS to gain control of vast parts of territory all across the Middle East. And over the profound objections of the American people, Our politicians left our borders wide open.
Dan Raviv, President Trump here trying to frame himself as really head and shoulders above his predecessors, but how significant in substantive terms, how significant a shift is this away from America's post-Cold War consensus?
Well, it could be, but haven't you noticed it happening this year? We're talking about the tone of the United States government. We're talking about the priorities. Clearly, those of President Trump and the people around him in the White House are very different from Barack Obama, who believed in the whole world cooperating. He wanted a multilateral world. So Trump, in his speech, but also in his approximately 60-page national security strategy, says we're done with multilateralism. He's proud to have walked away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership or the Paris Accord on climate change. He says it's America first. He believes that will get the Republican Party re-elected to hold Congress this coming year. This will get him re-elected in 2020. And I guess in all sincerity, he thinks it's better at least for America. So you're sitting in Tel Aviv. Our other guest is in Moscow. I'm not sure it's so great for foreigners, but Trump clearly wants to put America first. Eylon.
Okay, Dan Raviv, let's now go to Moscow. We have our other guest, Alexei Klebnikov, from the Russian International Affairs Council. Alexei, I'm quoting you here from this document. China and Russia challenge American power, influence and interest, attempting to erode U.S. security and prosperity. They do, don't they?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes. But on the other hand, no, because if to listen attentively to what Trump said, so make America first again, I think it's the primary goal of any leader of any nation. So for sure, Xi in China and Vladimir Putin in Russia also want to do that as well. But certainly that make certain clashes of their interests in different regions, for example, in the Middle East or in Europe or elsewhere. But what was really important to hear from Trump's recent speech is that he mentioned yesterday's call of Vladimir Putin to him, where he thanked the United States and its CIA service for providing a crucial intel info which helped to prevent a terror attack in St. Petersburg. By that, actually, Trump demonstrated that actually this is the way how in his vision, the cooperation between the United States and Russia or China or any other power can work.
Alexei, I want to ask you, President Trump seems to take on Russia, saying it needs to confront ways that it's subverting American interests, but he also takes on the international order. He's talking about wanting to support a system of sovereign states, doing away with the multilateral order that has defined U.S. diplomacy. That's something that Russia should welcome, right?
Indeed, that's the thing which Vladimir Putin is pushing for the long time, that the bilateral world does no longer exist, and unilateral world is for sure does not longer exist. So this is the time for multilateral world. And in fact, Trump is reiterating this philosophy, as we will, or an approach. So I think there is, it might be seen or perceived as a point where Russia's and U.S. interests might converge. For example, as Trump repeated in his speech, the fight against radicalism and ISIS. And actually, it's also, on the one hand, it's a funny thing, but in fact, it's a reality. He also was another in the chain of world leaders who acknowledged the defeat of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. To quote Trump, so it's almost 100% of territory which was previously occupied by ISIS is now liberated.
U.S. and Russian interests being aligned over the dismantling of the multilateral order. Truly an extraordinary shift in geopolitical relations. Alexei Klebnikov in Moscow, thank you very much. We're taking a very short break. When we come back, protests in Austria as a new far right enters the government, and at the UN Security Council, Jerusalem on the agenda. We'll be right back.
Israel the Middle East, the world. Get your daily dose every morning on I-24 News. News from around the world to around the corner. Jeff Smith brings you the top stories, the hard news, and analysis you need to know. Weekday mornings at 7:05 a.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Strictly Security. Your weekly look into security, intelligence, and strategic affairs. Our team brings the latest on the major international conflicts. Analysis of the major security issues right here in the Middle East and around the globe. Join us for a close look at innovative military technology and get up to speed with what's happening in cyberspace. Saturdays, 8:05 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
What you need to know, the news, fast and to the point, and the in-depth interviews that will keep you in your seat from the people that you trust. I-24 News presents The New Rundown, co-hosted by Nurit Ben and Kalev Ben David. Every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Politics, economics, business, and technology. Get the real news and the real insight about what's happening around the world. Michelle McCory breaks down the top stories of the day from the Middle East to the U.S. Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. Austria has a new government. The Chancellor is 31 years old. The Vice-Chancellor heads a party with Nazi roots. Thousands of Austrians protested in central Vienna against the new coalition between Sebastian Kurz's Conservative People's Party and the far-right Freedom Party, or FPO, of Heinz Christian Strache. It makes Austria the only Western European state with the far-right in power. The FPO was given the Interior, Foreign and Defence Ministries. It wants stricter rules on asylum seekers. And as an ally of Russia's ruling party, it wants the EU to ease sanctions on the Kremlin. During the inauguration of the new government, the President of Austria had this to say.
I am aware that many people in Austria see the new government and its plans positively. Others are neutral or observant, and many are skeptical or partly dismissive. I understand this. In a democracy, different opinions exist.
For more, let's bring in our international affairs correspondent Bianca Zanini. Bianca, the presence of the far right in a Western European government is something that's going to alarm many capitals, not least the Israeli government. Do we have any response from the Israeli government, the Jewish community in Vienna?
Right, so this election has actually proved to be a bit of a balancing act for Israel and for the EU, for that matter. Israel has a long-standing policy not to interact with nationalist, anti-Semitic parties. Last time the Freedom Party joined the government in 2000, Israel withdrew its ambassador. We saw significant cooling in the relationship between the two countries. But since then, the reality on the ground has changed, and Israel's response is sort of reflective of that.
The reality on the ground in Austria as well as Israel?
Both places, exactly. The Freedom Party, first of all, has worked on softening its image. It's worked on moving closer to Israel. It has expressed similar views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as, for instance, the Likud party. It supports settlements. It's even talked about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That is not likely to happen, but it does show a shift.
A certain attempt among the nationalist parties to cozy up towards Israel.
Exactly. And this time what we did get from Israel was a temporary response. The Israeli foreign minister is saying that they're going to boycott the ministers from the Freedom Party, but maintain working relations with their offices for now.
So that means they're going to continue talking to the ambassador, but not to the minister?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was actually reportedly ready to sort of accept some of these renunciations from the Freedom Party of its anti-Semitic past, which could be seen as a pragmatic approach from Benjamin Netanyahu. He understands that the far right in Europe is too strong and too powerful to completely ignore. We've seen him getting closer to Viktor Orban in Hungary, much to the frustration of the Hungarian Jews. That said, this statement from Israel right now is closer in line with what we've heard from the Jewish community in Austria.
Bianca, you mentioned that last time the FPO entered the Austrian government at the turn of the millennium, Israel withdrew its ambassador. At the same time, the EU also imposed sanctions on Vienna. Have we heard a peep from Brussels this time?
Oh, this time it's been much more muted, not just Israel, but also from the EU and from the streets. In 2000, the Europeans slapped sanctions on Austria. There were massive protests on the streets. We saw about 150,000 people go against this party. This time, the police estimated about 5,500, much less, and the EU has welcomed the new government. Now, earlier this year, there were elections in France, there were elections in the Netherlands, and everyone was breathing a sigh of relief that the far-right parties didn't get as far as was feared.
I mean, the far-right were the runners-up in the French presidential election. It was a historic victory for them.
Exactly. They did get far, but they didn't get into government. But now, the issues that we're seeing with the elections in Austria, the Czech Republic, Germany even, this arguably shows that the rise of the far right is still very much happening, just perhaps in a bit of a slower pace than anticipated. And the core of all of this is the issues of migration and globalization, right? It includes jobs, security, and self-determination. Kurz has said that he is pro-EU, but also that he wants a harsh line on immigration. There's a clash right there. And going forward, Austria is likely to take things in the direction of Poland and Hungary and sort of join into this bloc that's going to go head-to-head with Brussels.
I mean, Bianca, if we're already looking to the east, it's not just the FPO in Austria, it's the National Front in France, it's far-right parties all across Europe that seem to have this Russia connection, seem to be either getting some sort of support from the Kremlin or expressing support, weakening sanctions. I mean, if these are nationalist parties that claim to be speaking up for these European, for their own European peoples, it's strange that they seem to be aligning themselves with Russia. Let's just have a listen to what Heinz-Christian Strache had to say.
About the sanctions against Russia, yes, we wish for them to be lifted. We will try to be part of any change in that direction as mediators if wanted, and try to find a solution in the interest of Europe to bring Russia and Europe closer together once more.
Bianca, what's in it for European nationalist parties to cozy up to the Kremlin?
Very simple. It's the idea of self-determination, the ability to close borders, to decide for themselves, and that matters to people. It's Euroscepticism, and that is very much in line with what Putin wants, a weaker Europe. They've got similar ideologies when it comes to Islamic radicalization, restricting immigration, fighting cultural liberalism, and having a strong leader, something that the EU really has failed to do so far.
So Putin is very happy to be helping European leaders who want to undermine the European system because that makes a weaker Western flank for him. Bianca Zanini shedding wonderful insights as always, international affairs correspondent. Thank you very much. We're taking a short break. When we come back, the United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that would have urged it to withdraw its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The US was the only nation to vote against the Egyptian draft, supported by all other states. We will be back in just a minute.
The trends, the fads, the breakthroughs. Get it all on Trending. From food, music, and art to advances in modern medicine. Meet the trendsetters and the tech giants who make it all happen on Trending with Emily Francis. Weekdays beginning at 8 a.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Unflinching, opinionated. Weeknights, David Schuster and Shayna Estulin bring you analysis, interviews, and opinions that connect us to the Middle East and the world. Watch Crossroads weeknights starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Welcome back to Perspectives, and now for some high-stakes diplomacy. The United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that would have urged it to withdraw its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The US was the only nation to vote against the Egyptian draft, supported by all 14 other members of the Security Council. The Palestinians are now planning to seek UN General Assembly support instead. The UN Security Council has waded into the question of Jerusalem before. In 1980, it condemned Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem, which Israel had captured from Jordan in 1967. It called on states with embassies in Jerusalem to take them out of the city, and they all did. The UN considers East Jerusalem occupied Palestinian territory, but it doesn't recognize any sovereignty in West Jerusalem, saying the city's status must be determined in final status negotiations. It's an anomaly dating back to 1947, when the UN wanted to make Jerusalem an international city. US Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley said the US mustn't make the same mistake as it did last year when it abstained on Resolution 2334, which labelled East Jerusalem occupied Palestinian territory.
To the United Nations' shame, this has been a disproportionately hostile place for the Middle East's most enduring democracy. The United States refuses to accept the double standard that says we are not impartial when we stand by the will of the American people by moving our U.S. embassy. But somehow the United Nations is a neutral party when it consistently singles out Israel for condemnation. For decades, Israel has withstood wave after wave of bias in the UN and its agencies. The United States has often stood beside Israel. We did not on December 23, 2016. We will not make that mistake again.
And with a nod to the Hanukkah holiday spirit, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to Twitter to thank US Ambassador Haley for her veto.
Thank you, Ambassador Haley. On Hanukkah, you spoke like a Maccabee. You lit a candle of truth. You dispelled the darkness. One defeated the many. Truth defeated lies. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you, Nikki Haley.
I-24 News correspondent Tal Heinrich joins us now from New York. Tal, the US didn't manage to get the support of a single other nation on the Security Council. How did it try to persuade them, and why did it fail so miserably?
Well, the result of the vote was, we can say, pretty much expected, Eylon. It's interesting that no other country chose to abstain, maybe, but we knew that the U.S. will veto the vote. I don't think it's really possible to change a country's decision right there on the spot, right before the vote. But as we saw, Nikki Haley today was once again isolated on the international level at the UN Security Council in regards to this draft resolution concerning the status of Jerusalem and Israel, breaking once again with the international consensus in this respect. And Nikki Haley, as we heard, she pointed out to a different UN resolution, one that was passed exactly 1 year ago, resolution number 2334, in regards of Israeli settlement expansion. She said that the United States wouldn't have made the same mistake again, the mistake that the Obama administration has done, and that is not to veto that other vote. She tried to maybe draw a certain line between Trump's declaration of Jerusalem. She said that Trump's declaration is not an obstacle to peace like Resolution 2334. She said that that resolution actually prejudges certain issues that have to be resolved in final status negotiations, unlike Trump's Jerusalem declaration.
Tal Heinrich, the Palestinians are now calling for an emergency meeting of the United Nations General Assembly. What can they hope to achieve there that they couldn't achieve at the Security Council?
Well, not much, Eylon, not from a legal point of view, that's for sure. Where the Palestinians can go right now is push the Secretary General to convene the General Assembly and try to just pass this resolution there. But if passed, it won't be a binding resolution as one passed by the UN Security Council, something that we didn't see happening today. What it can do is cause a major diplomatic blow or some punch to the state of Israel that might generate some other international effect. We heard today Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, he was saying to Arab media that the Palestinians will try to push to become full members of the United Nations, and maybe such a, bigger effect can be created if such a resolution will be passed at the General Assembly, and it won't be in favor of the State of Israel, but it will be just on the diplomatic level. It won't be binding in any kind of other legal way.
Tal, 5 members of the UN Security Council have diplomatic missions to the Palestinian Authority in Jerusalem. They're called consulates general. Did that irony fact come up at all in the debate?
Not so much. Well, some might call it irony, but for these states, I don't think they see it as irony. They see it just as a reality to them. It's not something that should be viewed in an ironical point of view. But we heard, for example, that Erdogan, president of Turkey, will try to push and establish an embassy in East Jerusalem, or maybe try to transform the Turkish consulate in East Jerusalem to become the official embassy, Turkish embassy to the Palestinians. But there was some other sort of irony that Nikki Haley did point out to today in regards to resolution, once again, 2334, the one that was passed a year ago. And she said that it's a resolution against the expansion of Israeli settlements in general, and she spoke about East Jerusalem, that it's something that Israel cannot really implement because, you know, it also concerns the Jewish quarter inside the eastern part of the city. So that was the irony that was pointed to at the Security Council today.
Okay, Tal Heinrich at the United Nations, thank you very much. We move now to Under the Radar, where we break down the complexities of the stories impacting the Middle East and look closely at what can be easily missed in a landscape tangled with conflicting interests, ideologies and agendas. This is Under the Radar. And here in the studio we have our senior Middle East correspondent, Mohammed Al-Qasim. Mohammed, the question of Jerusalem has historically been a point around which the whole Arab and Muslim world have rallied around, but are there any fault lines within the Arab bloc on the question of Jerusalem right now?
This time it appears to be the case. We are seeing two different camps being established this time regarding the consequences of President Trump's announcement and also the reaction of some Arab and Muslim countries. The first camp, we are looking at Turkey as the leader of this camp, with Iran, Qatar, the Palestinian Authority, and Jordan in this camp. Both President Mahmoud Abbas and King Abdullah of Jordan are furious with the U.S. decision, especially King Abdullah, who sees himself as the custodian of the holy sites in East Jerusalem, both Islamic and Christian, and he believes that the U.S. did not communicate to him about its announcement. So,
and on the other side of the
on the
fault
other
line?
side, what's the other camp? It's led by the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Those are three camps that are trying to kind of calm the situation down. They have placed pressure on President Abbas not to increase the tension, not to call for clashes in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, and to work with the U.S. administration. So even with their reaction, in fact, neither any of these three countries sent a high-level official to the emergency summit in Istanbul, the OIC, or otherwise known as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So we're seeing two different camps being created right now, tilting the Jordanians and the Palestinians closer to Qatar and Iran. The others, they're what they're called the moderate Arab countries, and they are definitely behind the U.S.
Okay, Mohammed, very briefly, Jordan's King Abdullah is on his way to the Vatican. He's not going for a confessional, is he?
No, he's not. He's going to the Vatican, trying to get the approval and the support and the backing of the Pope and regarding the holy sites in Jerusalem. It's very important for the Jordanian monarch to get that support, but also he will leave the Vatican and head to Paris for another important meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron, where President Mahmoud Abbas will be at the end of this week meeting with the French president. Maybe both leaders are looking for the French connection, trying to revive the stalled peace process.
Okay, Mohammed Al-Qasim keeping his ear on the ground under the radar for us. Thank you very much. We're taking a very short break. When we come back, a new explosive report reveals how the Obama administration allowed Iranian proxy Hezbollah to develop a multinational, multi-billion criminal enterprise.
This week on I-24 News, a place of staggering beauty with rock and salt formations not seen anywhere else on Earth. But could Israel be losing its most famous natural landmark? Some are saying that the Dead Sea may dry out completely by 2050. Find out why this natural wonder is in danger of disappearing forever. Can we keep the Dead Sea alive? Join us Friday, December 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News. Fearless, timely, and always engaging. Every night, David Schuster brings the news from around the world to your front door. Watch Stateside, weeknights at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
This week on High Definition, filmmaker Enrique Zimmerman delves into the question of Catalonian independence. Can it remain part of Spain? And what of its proud history, language, and identity? Must it all be set aside? A special interview with Carlos Puigdemont from his exile in Brussels on the eve of the dramatic vote. Join Lauren Iso on High Definition, Tuesday, 10:03 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Welcome back to Perspectives. The Obama administration was so keen to reach a nuclear deal with Iran, it allowed Lebanese terror group Hezbollah to get away with building a multinational, multi-billion-dollar criminal empire. That's the explosive revelation in Politico, which finds Obama suppressed a U.S. task force targeting Hezbollah's criminal activity in order to pave the way for the 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran. The White House derailed Project Cassandra, a secret law enforcement campaign targeting drug trafficking by the Iranian proxy. Let's take a listen to some of the details.
Agents working out of a top-secret DEA facility in Chantilly, Virginia, used wiretaps, undercover operations, and informants to map Hezbollah's illicit networks, with the help of 30 U.S. and foreign security agencies. They followed cocaine shipments, some from Latin America to West Africa and onto Europe and the Middle East. Others through Venezuela and Mexico to the United States. They tracked the river of dirty cash as it was laundered by, among other tactics, buying American used cars and shipping them to Africa. When Project Cassandra leaders sought approval for some significant investigations, prosecutions, arrests, and financial sanctions, officials at the Justice and Treasury Departments delayed, hindered, or rejected their requests.
Let's go now to the U.S., where we're joined by our senior national correspondent, Michael Shaw. Michael, really shocking revelations in Politico. Is Washington shocked?
Washington probably isn't as shocked as it may seem in the headlines there. I think that these sort of things will typically happen when there's some part of intelligence that is working and you have the president and the White House working towards an agreement, an international agreement. Very often, a lot of the underlying investigations, underlying sanctions would be put aside. But the fact that it was such an abrupt turn and the fact that the Trump administration is looking into anything that may have been sort of off-putting about the way the Obama administration got involved in the Iran nuclear deal may bring this a little further to the surface. You know, I think when you analyze what happened here, at first blush, it's astonishing that they would take something that seemed to have so much meat on its bones and cast it aside in the interest of doing something else. But when you think about what the intelligence departments may have been saying about pursuing this within Hezbollah, going after people within Hezbollah, when very likely there were CIA informants within Hezbollah at the time, I think that it starts to make a little bit more sense why the prioritization happened that way, Eylon.
Michael, try to help me understand the thinking that goes through President Obama's Obama's head. You know, we know that he said that Iran should be and will be a regional power, but why is he so keen on making Iran a regional power that he's willing to allow Hezbollah to develop this massive criminal enterprise?
Well, I think that one thing to remember is that the massive criminal enterprise predated Obama becoming president. These investigations started in the last years of the Bush administration. But taking that apart, taking the personalities away, Barack Obama wanted, from the very get-go, I mean, his first trips were to the Arab world, to the Middle East. He wanted to leave a mark in bringing the Arab world into the world conversation once again. So if he was going to make Iran part of that world conversation, he was going to have to deal with people the United States hadn't been accustomed to dealing with before. He was fairly myopic about getting this deal done, and his myopia on that issue speaks to why he said, okay, or his departments would have said, well, we're in the middle of this investigation through the Justice Department, through the State Department, trying to get these people for money laundering, drug trafficking, a lot of it. Why his intelligence experts will say, well, this is not really the right thing to do right now. You want to at least not mess with the fact that Hezbollah and Iran are close allies, and the fact that there are people within our Justice Department right now working with Hezbollah. It might jeopardize this peace, and this peace President Obama at the time thought was much, much more important than anything, it seems.
Michael, look, I'm not an international diplomat, but it would seem to me that surely putting pressure on Iran means the United States would be more likely to get a better deal in the negotiations with Iran rather than taking the pressure off.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But, and again, I should also say, I like you, I am not a diplomat either.
We can both aspire, Michael.
We can. We talk to them once in a while. That's about it. But, I mean, on paper, that would seem to be the case. But there are so many different dynamics that go into this, especially when it comes to the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah, and also the relationship between China and that part of the world. Because trying to appease China at all costs was a very important part of the Iran decision, trying to get them to the table with the United Nations. So there's so many moving parts here. To have this drug investigation, the evidence in Project Cassandra laid out so beautifully by great reporting in Politico, it seems, my God, how could they not have pursued this? But I'm sure, knowing that the way the State Department works, they made reasonable decisions, what they thought were reasonable decisions, in order to do that. However, where this investigation stands now, where their pursuit is now, is important. It's important to the Trump administration, because if this is more than I read it right now, then the Trump administration is going to want to pounce on that, because they want to discredit anything that went into the Obama administration and President Obama deciding that peace was more important, that this nuclear deal was more important than anything that was going on in the intelligence community outside of it. So I do think that there's certainly something to be looked at, and this is why reporting is so important. But I don't necessarily think that the alarms have to go off that this was a real miscarriage of justice because they prioritized one thing over the other. I simply don't know the answer to that.
Michael, you say that President Trump is going to want to pounce on this, but very briefly, is it possible to reactivate this investigation, start serving charges, or has Hezbollah's enterprise got so large that it's no longer quite so easy to crack down on it?
Well, I don't think it was ever easy to crack down. The investigation is still alive. There's still people looking into it. Again, though, it would have to do with what's going on behind the scenes as to whether or not Hezbollah came to the table with Iran and agreed to participate to some level and support Iran getting into this deal, and how fragile that support is. That's something that they would know. But if that is fragile support, Eylon, that you'll be sure that the Trump administration is going to bring this up.
And Michael, very briefly, have we heard any calls from within the political system to reactivate this investigation, to pick up where the Obama administration left off?
I think you will hear them. We haven't heard them yet. This is still very new, and I think that the calls will probably come, and they'll probably come from the Republican side, Eylon.
Okay, interesting that they shouldn't come from the Democratic side as well, but foreign policy very much a partisan game nowadays. Michael Shaw, senior national correspondent in the US, thank you very much. Okay, we're taking a very short break. It's an unseasonably warm winter in Israel, 23 degrees at centigrade heights. Doesn't feel like Christmas, but we'll take a look at how the Christmas spirit is being felt in Tel Aviv. And then, from Elton John to Star Wars, we'll get the latest update from Hollywood. You don't want to miss that. We'll be right back.
Step inside a world of high-tech and intrigue, starting from the heart of the Middle East to wherever news is happening. We'll show the untold stories of security, intelligence, and strategic affairs, along with in-depth analysis of global conflicts, military technology, and cybersecurity. All this and more on Strictly Security.
Saturdays, 8:05 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Unflinching, opinionated. Weeknights, David Schuster and Shayna Estulin bring you analysis, interviews, and opinions that connect us to the Middle East and the world. Watch Crossroads weeknights starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
With just a week to go before Christmas, people in Israel are getting into the holiday spirit. Well, at least those who celebrate. I-24 News' Maya Kramer went searching in Tel Aviv for all the best spot to fill all your decorating needs.
Christmas season is here, and this is a holiday I love so much. It reminds me of my childhood in New York, of Santa Claus and Jingle Bells and snowy days. But as you can see, it's like 70 degrees here, and I'm not really feeling the Christmas vibe. So I decided to go and search and find it for myself. South Tel Aviv, and I've made a Christmas list for things I need to find, like tree, lights, ornaments, mistletoe. I'm looking for real trees. I'm wondering where I can find them. And also, I want to find some people that I can celebrate Christmas with. I actually found some Israelis shopping for Christmas trees. What are you doing?
I'm actually buying a Christmas tree because we live in Jaffa, and every year they're putting a big Christmas tree in the front, and my kids is really expecting for it, so I'm buying a little one for her.
Is this the first time you've bought a Christmas tree?
Yeah.
And so you're not actually celebrating Christmas?
No, we're not, because we're Jewish and we're celebrating Hanukkah. But it's nice and I like it and it's happy.
So I think I found my ornaments. Yay! We've got some things I could hang on the tree that I don't have yet. And here we have more, some glass ones, really cute. Okay, I'm ready to go.
It's a lot of, religions come in the street to buy a decoration for the Christmas, starting by Philippines, Christian, Arabs, Jews.
Where can I find a real Christmas tree? Where else can I look?
Maybe it's so close in, Central Station, Tachana Merkazit in Hebrew. You can find there.
Let's go to the central bus station and see if we can find a tree there. So I am finally feeling at home. I'm at the Christmas market in South Tel Aviv. I'm going to pull out my list, look for what I need to. This market has been here since 20 years. For 20 years, this market is in existence. Every year, they come here in December in the bus station and sell all these amazing, colorful Christmas stuff that I am dying to pick up right now. Okay, so now that I have most of my fun stuff, Santa, all I want for Christmas is a real Christmas tree.
I'm having a lot of fun here.
What would you say is your biggest selling item here?
Christmas tree.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey! Merry, Merry Christmas! Woo! So, looks like I'm gonna have to have a plastic tree in my home. Apparently, in order to have a real Christmas tree, you have to order it about 6 months in advance from the JNF. They have to plant the tree, and only then it can be ready for you by Christmas. So, I'll just have to choose one of these guys and just choose the one that looks the most like a real Christmas tree. Merry Christmas!
Bye. Buying a Christmas tree from the JNF only in Israel. Well, on to Hollywood. Superstars lining up to honour Elton John during his Grammy tribute concert. And The Force was with The Last Jedi, which broke a box office record. More from Hollywood.
Elton John should get a kick out of his Grammy tribute concert next month. Superstars are lining up to honor him on stage. Among them, Sam Smith and Miley Cyrus. Elton John has won 5 Grammys during his long music career, including the Grammy Legend Award. A meeting of the Prince and the President. Newly released video shows Prince Harry and former President Obama warming up for a radio interview, which was recorded during the Invictus Games in September. It will air on the BBC on December 27th. The predictions came through at this weekend's box office. Star Wars: The Last Jedi rules.
It's just a passion. It's, people have their hobbies. This is a huge hobby.
A lot of people sharing that same passion. Moviegoers paid an estimated $220 million to see the second installment in the third Star Wars trilogy. This is the second best movie opening in the U.S. ever, right behind the movie's predecessor, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, which took in close to $249 million its opening weekend. The newly released family film Ferdinand grossed over $13 million, and the animated adventure Coco had $10 million in ticket sales this weekend. And that's what's happening in Hollywood.
My whole life, there's been something that made me different.
And that wraps up today's edition of Perspectives. Whether it's the UN vote on Jerusalem or the far right entering the Austrian coalition, we hope you've gained some new perspectives about today's major headlines. Let's leave you with these images of Siberian ice swimmers staging a flash mob in support of the Russian Olympics team banned from the upcoming games over doping allegations. They glided on the frozen surface of the famous Lake Baikal wearing nothing but bikinis and then braved its freezing waters. I'm Eylon Levy. You've been watching Perspectives, and thanks for joining us.